All right, guys, life is crazy right now, and it's time for some honest, real, raw, candid, and authentic conversations about what's going on in our society as men. It's not okay to stand by idly. It is time that we have the conversations that many people don't want to have.
Racism in our world today has reached another flashpoint here in the United States of America, a country which stands divided. Even through civil war, civil rights, segregation, laws, rules, and regulations, remnants of the racial biases remain and continue to plague the heart with a polarizing tension. The only thing that can heal this tension is love and understanding. In a society driven by narratives which are riddled with lies, it is time to have raw, candid, and authentic conversations about the subjects tearing at the seams of our lives. Over the next few minutes, I want to ask you to consider another's perspective. Just because you see things the way you do does not mean that it is the way they really are. This message has value for all, but is directed to brothers and sisters in Christ.
So, why the camo? Yeah. Why the camo? Ultimately, it's the fact that we are each outdoorsmen to some degree. We each enjoy being outside in God's creation. We each enjoy hunting. We each just like connecting with the Father and with others in the outdoors. And I thought that camo would be a neat way to just show that unity. Go ahead and just share a little story from some of your outdoors experience.
Well, I got down to Texas and I started hunting with a guy and just, a bunch of guys, deer camp and rowdy, and they're going to give you a bad time if you missed. Well, it was my son's last football game of his high school career, last regular season game, anyways, of his high school career. And smaller buck walks out and rifle. could have been no more than 50 yards away, and I shot it. It runs off into the woods, and I waited a few moments, and I walked in there and he was still standing, and I had to go. And about a month later, his nephew got a shot on it and got that same deer that I pushed out. I just never heard the end of it.
Was it a nice one?
It was a solid buck. Yeah, so just bad shot, Rob, just can't hit the side of a barn, all that stuff. Yeah.
You're telling
Never
that
lived it
story, and
down.
I got a couple memories from this past season.
Well, no, we don't want to bring that
never
up.
mind.
All right. I'm not talking about that.
We all miss, man. Gosh.
Yep.
Yeah, we're talking about some of our hunting memories, and some of my fondest hunting memories is growing up as a kid hunting with my dad. Mm-hmm. And one of my dreams as a kid is to have a son to be able to pass that memory on to, and the tradition of hunting. And I've been blessed with a son. He just turned 19, matter of fact. And a couple years ago, we were hunting, and he shot his first buck with a bow. And just that day was just so perfect, to experience that and to see his excitement. He was just lit up. And that's probably my best hunting memory of all time. And I've been pretty blessed to hunt a lot of places with a lot of folks, but that moment in time right there was so powerful for me and left a mark. So, yeah.
What you got, Mike?
Last season, I got my first buck, 10-pointer. I went out like around 1 p.m. So I'm up in the tree stand, and I'm like, all right, let's see if anything comes through. It's getting a little cold, and about a couple hours later goes by, and I don't see anything. Well, I start to slowly reach down into my bag to get some hand warmers, and this buck comes up the hill, crosses over the path, then he kind of disappears, and then he comes back. And I'm looking at him, and I'm like, no way, no way. So, of course, for hunters, that pose that they give you. And so I'm praying, and I'm like, Lord, is this the one? Is this for me? And the deer just kept that pose, man. I said, okay, all right. So I shoot. The deer jumps, takes off downhill. I sit there and I wait a little bit. Well, I'm hunting by myself, and this hill is not nice. So I start texting my buddy, hey man, I need you. I got one. Yeah. So long story short, my buddy comes, helps me get this thing up, and I mean, like, we're deep. Well, there's this road crew working on the street in front of the property, and they ended up helping us haul it the rest of the way. Wow. Well, I drive a Hyundai Sonata. It's getting dark, and the deer's in the trunk, but the lid won't come because the antlers. So I try to tie a rope around, and I'm driving, and this deer is looking out the window like this, and the light in the trunk is on. So it's just, so I'm driving down Montgomery Road, cracking up laughing, because I'm like, I just know how this is. I'm waiting to get pulled over, man. There are people driving behind me, man, and I just can't stop laughing.
It looks like you kidnapped you.
Yeah, I mean, it was bedded down, man. So that's how it looked all the way to the process.
Wow.
So mine's a hunting story that has no good ending, except I was in the Rocky Mountains. So I prepared for months for a big old elk hunt out in Gunnison, Colorado. And I thought I was in shape. Like, I was determined I am in shape, because I was running, backpacking. Very first morning, my guy's like, listen, there's a herd of 250 with almost a 280 class bull elk in it. We're gonna go get it. I said, I'm in. When we get to where we're hunting, we're about probably 10,000 feet, just like tree line. The elk are on the opposite side of this huge bowl that's about 3/4 of a mile around. I'm like, all right, no big deal. I can run 3/4 of a mile. He takes off. So I take off. About 40 yards in, I stop. I'm like, am I dying? I mean, there's water just pouring off me. I get down to, I make it 3/4 of a mile. They're still kind of working their way down. I get to this old down cabin. And when I lay down, I think I'm having a heart attack. My guide looks at me and goes, are you okay? Are you ready to shoot? And I said, bro, shoot? I can't even breathe. What do you mean shoot? He goes, get your gun ready to shoot. I said, this is for someone else to kill. I can't even hold my gun up. So as I'm laying there just thinking I'm about to die, sweat pouring off of me, not 15 minutes later, I hear someone shoot, and he goes, that was your bull elk. I said, I don't care. I'm still living.
All right, guys, so this is where it gets real. I want you guys to be as raw and as candid as you are anywhere else, all right? I'm not asking you to be more raw and candid necessarily than you aren't, but as raw and candid as you've ever been. And just know that, man, we're sharing in love, and we want truth, you know, and we want unity, and we want to be there for our brothers. So, perception of current events.
I was blind till about 2 weeks ago, honestly, because I was going through my life doing my thing. But, you know, I think in a nutshell, major changes have to happen on a local level. They have to happen in the family unit, and they have to happen at the governmental level in Washington, D.C. But it starts in the family. It starts, I think, in your own personal little family unit. And from there, it's just like preaching the gospel. You talk to one, who talks to two, who talks to, next thing you know, you're making change.
That's good. Thanks. Mike?
I have to say, one aspect of it, it is beautiful to see people of different colors, different nationalities coming together for a common cause. Because I have to say that, to me, the only time I really felt equal was at the airport. What happened on in 9/11 back in 2001 was terrible. But what happened in the airport was that everybody got profiled. Everybody was treated the same. And today we are seeing people whose eyes are being opened, who are, you know, actually saying, hey, this isn't right. My frustration is that I'm like, why did it take so long? Because this isn't the first time. I'm glad that we're coming together. At the same time, I'm disappointed because you know, there is that other side that really acts like this is some political ploy. It's left versus right. There's a whole lot of just lumping people into one basket. Like when I was on Facebook and I was told, well, you know, are you calling me a racist? No, 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 I'm not calling you a racist. I don't know you. I don't know your experience. This isn't anyone in here. But it was like, I was trying to have this open dialogue, and there was this quick-tempered, like defensiveness. Mm-hmm. And there was no openness. And yet the premise of being a Christian was supposedly the foundation. So I like that we all are here. You know, it takes a lot of bravery to come together and say, hey, let's actually work this out.
Yeah.
Thanks. Appreciate that. Heath, will you share something?
So when you had asked me to participate in this, one of my first responses was, man, I want to do this, but I feel uncomfortable. I have a high anxiety about it, you know, because there's so much tension in the world. And it just makes me feel really, really uncomfortable because I don't understand a lot of what is going on. One of the things I didn't understand until today, I made a phone call with one of my friends. And the way it was described to me today is if you had a leg that was wounded, are you going to cater to this leg? Are you going to heal and mend and take care of the leg and minister to the leg that's broken or wounded? And that's so powerful. We've got families and that are hurting, our brothers and our sisters that are hurting.
Good. Thank you. Rob, your view.
For the country, it is definitely an awakening. It's amazing. We probably wouldn't have this type of attention if we weren't going through COVID. And we look at God and his sovereignty, and that all eyes were glued to our screens a couple weeks ago. And, you know, George Floyd is not the first. He's not the first. This has been going on for, you know, hundreds of years. And even, you know, through civil rights and segregation, this has been going on. And it was going on before we had cell phones and cameras out there. And so it's not new, but God in his sovereignty has all of our eyes on this right now. And nothing will unite people like a common enemy. And that common enemy has to be hate right now. That common enemy has to be hate and ignorance and violence. That has to be the common enemy right now. And that's all from the devil. And so I'm grateful right now. I'm mourning with my brothers and sisters in the black community and the George family and every family of anybody who's suffered police brutality or violence from the police. I mourn with them. But I don't think they died in vain. And I think all eyes are on this situation. And I truly believe that the church is the only one that can lead us through it.
You know, one of the biggest things, you know, you talk about that, you know, that hatred being our biggest enemy right now. Yeah, it is, but I think it's really driven by fear. Mm-hmm. You know, this fear of the unknown, this fear of being known, and this fear of, well, if I say I'm sorry, if I do anything, then I look like a coward.
Yeah.
You know, and I think one of the biggest things that I had to do was step back, say, brother, I'm sorry. I didn't see your hurt. Mm-hmm. I didn't see your pain. And I'm sorry. And I had to share that, man, I was ignorant to it. What man wants to say that he was ignorant to anything? You know, our pride, our flesh goes completely against that. And I really feel, you know, that's really embracing our culture today is just a spirit of pride. I would like you guys to just share a story with how you guys generated your perspective on life, you know, your perspective on current events. You know, what led you to how you understand and how you perceive things in today's world. So I'll start, for me, I was trying to think, I'm certain there were black boys and girls that I went to school with, but honestly, I don't remember. There weren't many. But I don't remember having a conversation with a black boy or black girl, black man or woman until late in my teenage years. Now, don't get me wrong. I was taught, that there was racism in our world. I was taught, how to love others, from my mom and dad. But I had no real life application, as far as what it was like to be a black person in that culture back then, and then you're growing into now. And before I met Rob, I knew black people. I knew many people of color. I've had conversations with many people, of color, but not a real raw, transparent conversation about, hey, dude, what do you think about what's going on in our world? And spending time with Rob hunting, man, it was really neat, where conversations weren't forced, but we wanted to know each other. And I wanted to know him, he wanted to know me, and wow, my eyes were open. Let's start with you, Rob.
I am of mixed heritage. My mom is Native American and white, and my dad is black. I have a pretty unique perspective in that I grew up around white people. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, and there's more white people than there's not a lot of black people there. But the first time I got called the N-word, I was 7 years old. At the corner store up the street from my house, trying to play video games, and a white kid who was probably 11 or 12 years old. I came home and told my mom that, and she's white and Native American, and she had to explain to me what that was, and how we don't stand for that, and how wrong he was, and she might have went back up to the store and found that little kid, because that's the type of person my mom is. Sorry, Mom. Sorry to out you, but you know who you are, and that's why we love you. But that was my first, real harsh experience with racism. I was 7 years old, and then just throughout my life, just being of mixed race, I always felt too white for my black friends and too black for my white friends. And that's just was the tension that I lived in. And my first experience, with harassment by a police officer was when I was 13 years old, and just a few of us were standing on a street corner in downtown Seattle, and I happened to lock eyes with a police officer who was across the street, and he reached for his gun. And I asked my friend, I said, "Did you see that?" And he was like, "Yeah, don't worry about it. That's just how they are." Other experiences with cops where they pull guns out on me for no reason. I've had a gun put to my head for no reason. The car wasn't stolen. There was no drugs. But I had a gun put to my head at 17 years old by a cop. And then just dating different girls. I would, have a girl say, "Yeah, we can date, but if my grandfather ever comes home, you got to hide in the closet." And I don't know how many people my age can tell you hide in the closet stories. Like literally, like Uncle Jim is coming, get in the closet. And so that's been my experience growing up.
Good, thank you. Let's go with you, Heath.
Yeah, so growing up, originally I was from Virginia. I was from the mountains of Virginia. Very much grew up in a bubble, per se. There wasn't a lot of other races where I grew up, and maybe when I was 10 years old, my family started moving around, and we went from Virginia up in the mountains to down to South Carolina, and talking about a world of different. I mean, that's just night and day difference. I stepped into a very divided, racially divided community at that point, and I said, well, and attitudes were just completely different, something that I had never experienced. And my experience was a lot like yours, baby, but on the other side.
Where you were the minority?
Where I was a minority, and I had a lot of your same experiences, but I was the white guy. And I grew up right's right, wrong's wrong, and trying to stand up to the right. I was very quickly singled out, and probably suffered a lot of the abuses that you guys go through on a daily basis. It was hard to deal with. I didn't understand it, and where I'm thinking, this shouldn't be happening, and people were standing by, allowing it to happen, is what I could not grasp at the time when I was younger. Why are my peers allowing this to take place? And it's just much different, and then obviously
Your white peers?
white peers, yeah, white teachers, they just turn their head. They don't want to address the issue at hand, right? There was a lot of tension there, so.
Rick, let's go to you, bud.
I grew up in an all-white country town in Northeast Ohio. We never had a black person in the history of our school, in the history of our high school, until I was a senior in high school. Wow. But I distinctly remember one of my classmates saying, "F you." And we all just laughed. We thought, that's funny, We didn't know. We just kind of laughed it off, right? So you just go through life. So I joined the Army. I was still the same guy. I was around all kind of guys, didn't really pay attention. I started recognizing, man, you're a different kind of cat, Rick. You don't really care what the color of someone's skin is, so I thought. Fast forward to 98, I meet my wife. She took a job coaching at Georgia Tech. Downtown, Midtown, Atlanta, Georgia, Berlin Center, Ohio. As night and day as possible. I said, just do me one favor, don't put me in the city. Not only did she put me in the city, she put me at 5th and Argonne right by Piedmont Park. It was then that I realized everybody has issues. Everybody needs to figure out how to get along. And accepting Christ in 1998 as a grown man and moving forward, I've really come to the conclusion that we must be grace-filled. Grace is the most important thing in my life. 2 weeks ago, I thought I was a grace-filled human being. And initially I was angry at the black community. I was angry at the police officer. I was angry at everybody but me. I knew it was a bad thing, and I knew the cop was wrong, and I wanted it to end. Just go away. Let's just push this under the rug. If we don't talk about it, we don't have to deal with it. So I worked with the Lady Vols. So in basketball and in softball and in track, one of the athletes that I worked with this past week said, "So are you racist against black athletes?" And I wrote, "Laughy face, are you kidding?" She goes, "Think about what I asked you and then answer the question appropriately." And I look back and I'm not, but she said, "Rick, you're not understanding the real meaning of what's going on here. You weren't racist towards black people, but you maybe unconsciously treated us differently." But it took a lot of discussions and asking and being humble and being vulnerable to my black friends to say, "Hey, am I white privileged?" Because I don't like that word. I'll be honest, I don't like the word white privileged.
I'm not a fan of white privilege, of the term, because of the way it's been hijacked and it beats people beat people over the head with it. Matter of fact, I hear more white people saying white privilege than I even hear black people saying white privilege. It's just it's catchy and it's real, and I'm not trying to act like it's not something that's real, because it is, but I prefer the term dominant culture. And dominant culture is a better way of explaining white privilege, because now you're not beating people over the head. Now if you say dominant culture, what I'm hoping is that clicks in somebody's mind, right? Because we have a dominant culture in this country, and that dominant culture has a skin color. That dominant culture is white people. There's more white people than there are black people and people of color in this country. And so if you belong to the dominant culture, well, you have privileges that go along with belonging to a dominant culture in the country in which you live in, or the area that you live in, or the concert that you're at, or wherever the school that you go to. If you belong to a dominant culture, then there's a power, there is a privilege that goes with that. So the privilege of belonging to a dominant culture is, I can call people whatever I want to call them, and why are you offended? And you don't have to worry about that. You're not in tune with what other people would wish to be called because you're only involved in the culture that you're involved in. You're not forced to be around people of color.
Right.
But if you grow up as a black man, if you grow up as a person of color in this country, and you want to live at a certain economic level, if I want to live in the neighborhood that I live in the suburbs of Cincinnati, then I have no choice but to live amongst people that don't look like me, that don't have my same upbringing, they don't have the shared culture that I do, they don't have the shared life experiences that I do, and they don't understand. But if you grow up white in this country, you can insulate yourself with white people. You don't have to deal with black people. I mean, at the store or at the movie theater or going out, but you could live in a neighborhood that's predominantly white and just continue being a part of the dominant culture. And so that is the privilege that people are trying to get people to wake up to.
Michael, if you would just.
Grew up in a small town called Lincoln Heights, Ohio, which is a special place. At one point in time, it was the largest all-black municipality in the U.S.
Wow.
Some of the most famous people that have come out of there was poet Nikki Giovanni, the Isley Brothers, and having a town like that, my father had friends that were white or from whatever background, so I believed that people were people. But it wasn't until I went to a Catholic school in Glendale, predominantly white school. My bus was considered the black bus. Bus 39, Mr. Bright was the driver. And they crammed us in 3 to a seat. And I mean, we were crammed.
Was your bus driver black?
Yeah. Mr. Bright was actually from Lincoln Heights. So I'm at this school, and you can count the black kids. Got called a name, and I didn't understand the name. And it was African Booty Sniffer. So I'm like, am I supposed to fight? Okay, I'm not gonna fight, because I don't want to get in trouble. I had a 5th grade teacher, and it was Black History Week. And the teacher threw out this little comment, and I remember myself and other black kids looked at each other like, what did she say? And she said, we're reading about slavery. And she then looked up and she said, you know what? I wouldn't mind having some slaves. And we all went like, did she just say that? She said, well, like to have somebody do stuff for you. But I didn't tell my parents because I was like, what do I? Because I thought that my parents would definitely take the teacher's side like I made it up or something. So I was just like, wow. That teacher then talked my father into tutoring me. After school, she would have me sit out on a bench on the school property. She would come out with me, and then she would say, I'll be right back. And she would never show back up. Wow. And I remember trying to tell my father, and my dad believes, my family believes in, he supports the teachers. Well, I remember I tried to tell my dad, because he was like, you're not doing well, and I'm paying for this tutor. And I said, yeah. And he was like, shut up. I said, okay. Okay. So it wasn't until I was grown that I was able to tell him. And he said, why didn't you say something? I said, you said shut up. So as life goes on, I'm riding in the car with a buddy. We're now seniors in high school. I'm allowed to stay out till midnight. We got pulled over driving through one town, doing the speed limit. It's nighttime. The radio doesn't work. The car has no tint. The cop follows us until we leave that jurisdiction. We turn, another jurisdiction picks us up. I got my hands out on the dash, ID already in my hand. I was taught, always be ready before the cop gets there. You never want to reach because you might not make it home. And they're justified because they have a badge, that stick, the gun. So keep your mouth shut. We have attorneys for that. My buddy's fussing, and I'm like, shut up, man. I'm going home tonight.
Yeah.
Cop comes up and he goes, hey, ID, whatever. You know why I stopped you? Buddy is fussing. I said, shut up. He goes, calm down, man. He said, reason why I stopped you was because the other cop radioed me and said that you were driving without your seatbelts on. This is at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. And while I'm sitting there, I tried to diffuse the situation. I leaned forward. I said, excuse me, officer? He said, yeah. I said, you see this car, right? He said, yeah. I said, would you ride in this car without the seatbelts on? And he fell out laughing. He fell out. And he was like, man, just go on. But we would get stopped all the time. We didn't drink. We didn't smoke. Man, our parents would kill us. I was never afraid of the police. I was afraid of going home. My whole thing was, man, if I ever have to go to jail, how long can y'all keep me? Because I'm not going back. And we grew up with, respect of authority, but at the same time, authority didn't really respect us.
I want to hear from both Michael and Rob what it's like to raise a kid in light of racism.
Well, for me, I have two sons. Raising them, it's tough. I think I shared a text with you where I said every time my sons leave my home driving, it's like prom night, every night. Wondering if they're going to be okay. Are they going to make it back? Without incident. That's scary to me.
I have 4 sons. I have one that's 21 years old, and in the Air Force, I have a soon-to-be 19-year-old, 17-year-old, and 16-year-old. So all boys.
Hell, you only 20.
Black don't crack. I think back to, I have a sordid background. I actually, during my adolescent days, I was pretty rough. I spent time on the streets, and then I got radically saved at 27 years old. And when I got saved, I got radically changed and just ripped out of this crazy lifestyle and was full on fire for Jesus, all things church, Bible studies, serving in the children's ministry, and life just began to be amazing for me. And, I still had, some of the friends around and everything, but just the people that were no good in my life, just God supernaturally removed them from my life. I didn't have to say anything. I didn't have to do anything. It was just an amazing thing that happened. So, life was good, and we were really involved in our church. We became leaders. We became deacons, and then I, became on staff as a pastor. So I was a part of a church where the theology was, we didn't talk about negative things. And, some people are familiar with that type of theology. Some people will call it prosperity gospel or prosperity theology. And some of what goes into that type of thinking and mentality is you don't really talk about the negative things. We only speak life, right? And so things were going really well. We were in a bubble. We were in a Christian bubble. My kids went to a Christian school that was multi-ethnic. Even though I experienced a whole lot, I got put in this bubble where everything was amazing, and I was under this theology where we didn't really talk about negative things, that I didn't really share with my kids a whole lot about racism. Because we had Samoans and Filipinos and white people and Koreans and everybody over. My house looked like all nations. And so, I just was like, man, it's happening. My kids are growing up in a way that I never grew up. They're not experiencing the same things that I'm experiencing. So I never and then I got a pretty good education on Black history growing up. I just assumed that my kids were learning the same things that I was learning. But come to find out, it wasn't even Black History Month. It was more like Black History Week at the schools that they were at. And they weren't learning. And so in 2013, I moved from liberal, progressive Pacific Northwest to Texas. And the racism is a little hard to detect in the Northwest. It's not hard to detect in Texas. The high school that my kids went to had had a full-on, a racist incident that had to be addressed every year. And N-bombs were dropped all over the school. In 2013, Confederate flags flew from the kids' trucks. They had cornhole games with Confederate flags. It was a toxic environment. And I started getting harassed by cops immediately in the little small town that I moved to. And then we've got social media now. And so now my kids are seeing these racist incidents happening on Twitter and on Facebook and on all the social media, and they're confused. And I felt so bad that I never talked to them. I never talked to them about the history of our country because I thought we were so good. And it's hard. It's hard talking to my kids now. I started talking to them then 6 years ago. And what I have to do as a Christian husband and father is teach my family that, yeah, we have bad incidents that happen with cops, but not all cops are bad. I have to teach them that because that's not what the world is showing them. And I have to not deny the truth that, yes, we have a long ways to go with implicit bias and systemic and structural racism that happens in this country that trickles down to our law enforcement, and still we see it today in fatalities with police with unarmed black people. That still happens. However, the tension that I live in is that I know that all cops aren't bad. I know that if somebody breaks into my house, I'm calling the police. I know that there are more good cops than bad cops. But that is also a reality that we have cops that are killing unarmed black people, and it's not right. So I have to teach them that, and that's the tension that I live in, and it's frustrating.
Yeah, I just want to say how much I appreciate the transparency and you guys sharing, your walk and your experiences with me. So appreciate it.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, we appreciate you.
For being open, man, for being willing to, and to share, because honesty is a two-way street. So,
Yeah, I think on a daily basis, people are afraid to expose themselves openly.
Yeah.
And it's an uncomfortable place to be, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And again, people that don't know Jesus, they don't have hope.
Nope.
And we have nothing to hold them accountable to, and so black men, black women, white men, white women that are doing things that just, it's out of hate. They don't have Jesus.
Right.
And they're not going to get Jesus without love, and so again, this is to address the body of Christ. All right, this isn't to fix all the problems.
Right.
This is to call to action men and women to step into their godly potential and to love those around them, not to settle for anything less, ever.
And to have some diverse cookouts.
Hey, celebrating that culture.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm tired of seeing, people who aren't in the body of Christ get this more than people in the body of Christ. The church has to shine right now. This has to be no more. There has to be no more. For us to have the fragrance of heaven, to draw people in. If we walk around with division and bigotry and partisan politics dividing our church, then we stink and we don't smell like heaven. And we create a barrier for people coming to know Jesus. If we walk around in ignorance and in the dark, then we are creating a barrier for people to know Jesus. I've said it once and I'll say it again. No sinner can stop the kingdom of heaven from advancing. Only a Christian can do that by our disobedience and our unwillingness to love and heal our neighbor.
Absolutely. Real quick, I got saved in a multicultural, multi-race church, and that atmosphere in that church, it was just powerful, and there was no division.
Yeah.
And man, I love that. And you know, you talk about the fragrance and of worship, and everybody was celebrated.
Come on.
You know, and that's just powerful.
Come on. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah. Unity is what we
Unity,
need.
yep.
When we become unified, then we can be reconciled.
Yep.
Right? We can't be reconciled because we were never together. So to be reconciled is to be brought back into something that was, but there's been hurt and inappropriate behavior from the start of this relationship in this country. So first, we become unified in Jesus. Jesus brings true unity, and then we all get reconciled to the Father.
Absolutely. Ooh, I got goosebumps.
Yeah, boy.
Preach it.
Here,
Yeah.
come in here.
What's that cramp look like?
Who wants to do it?
I got it.
So, where do we go from here? How do we as the church, brothers and sisters in Christ, move forward in this broken world with polarizing tension? We must choose Jesus above and before all. And then we must drop any agenda that compromises our love for others. When Jesus was surrounded by a group of people, he was asked, "Teacher, what is the most important thing?" Jesus responded by saying, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. And then love others." It is time that we take the part of loving others to a whole new level. In light of eternity, we are going to be held accountable, not just for what we do, but also for what we do not do.